You're listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. On this best of episode, you'll hear from Char-Lee Cassel, a registered dietitian, all about how to eat intuitively from a Christian perspective. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey there, Laura here. I'm just popping in with a quick reminder that I am currently on maternity leave, and we have done a few of these best of episodes, so you might have already heard some. And the best of episodes are basically where I've gone back into the archives of the Fed and Fearless podcast to find our top downloaded episodes. So that means they were our most popular and the most number of people wanted to hear them. So we're sharing a few of those as part of the content strategy for making sure we're still putting out the podcast while I am off. And this episode is definitely one of our most popular. I'm talking with Char-Lee Cassel all about intuitive eating for Christians. And if you're someone who has a faith-based practice and you want to explore intuitive eating, then this is going to be the episode for you. So I hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always, and I'm so excited about our interview today because it's a conversation that I honestly don't know a whole lot of other people on the internet having, and it was really exciting for me to get this opportunity to chat with her about all things intuitive eating and Christianity. So today on the show with me, I have Char-Lee Cassel. She's a registered dietitian and an intuitive eating coach for Christian women who are sick of struggling with body image and want to gain confidence with their food and exercise decisions. She has developed a positive body image and a healthy relationship with food and exercise through studying God's word and implementing the principles of intuitive eating in her own life. She's obsessed with Jesus, coffee, donuts, outdoor adventures, and motherhood. As you can see, Char-Lee and I have a lot in common, and we have a lot of similar beliefs and perspectives about nutrition and how our faith can play into our food and exercise choices. So this is going to be a really awesome interview, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So without further ado, here is Char-Lee. All right, everybody, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Char-Lee Cassel. How are you doing today, Char-Lee?
I'm doing well, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So if anyone who's listening to the podcast isn't familiar with you, I would love for you to tell us your story, specifically what brought you to where you are today as a Christian intuitive eating dietitian.
Okay. Well, probably in my early 20s, I got interested in exercise and eating. I lived in Southern California then, and there was this huge drive, I think, to change my body and look a certain way. And so that's where I first got really interested in exercise and eating. I started working out and modifying what I was eating, dieting a bit. And then I was in a relationship with someone who I think really had, I don't know if you'd say an eating disorder, but really disordered eating. And he kind of taught me some really disordered beliefs around food and exercise. I was working out like twice a day and barely eating anything. I earned my food. I earned my worth based on how good I was with exercise and all of those things. And that's when I became like so interested in learning about exercise and nutrition. And at the time I was a psychology major, and I decided to pursue nutrition and exercise. And so a couple years later, I was in school for nutrition and exercise physiology. And things had progressed in terms of my own disordered eating, where I felt really out of control with food and stuff was really crazy. And I was very proudly explaining all of my food rules to someone. And she ever so gently just said, you know, you might want to read this book, Intuitive Eating. I learned about it and it really helped me. And I think I was offended. I remember being a little bit offended. And then I did get the book and started reading it and just really related to the deprivation, dieting cycle, binging after restricting. And I also at that point had kind of started working with some people in school on eating and exercise things. I just kind of started recognizing like, oh, maybe this isn't serving me. Maybe this isn't healthy. And started working through intuitive eating. At that same time, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. At the time, they had said maybe lupus, maybe rheumatoid arthritis. So I have this autoimmune inflammatory arthritis thing going on. And I was confused because I thought that I had been like eating and exercising for my health and doing all these things good for my health. So it was really frustrating to have that diagnosis, and I couldn't really keep it up anymore. The deprivation, the restricting was getting really severe. And then the binges, you know, just that pendulum was getting even more extreme. And my body was falling apart. I all of a sudden had no energy. I was an avid CrossFit fitter and power lifter, and I couldn't hold on to a bar anymore. I couldn't keep myself on a pull-up bar. And so I started reading the intuitive eating stuff and giving myself permission to rest a little bit and work through the intuitive eating book. And it probably took me about 2 years of working through that stuff and working through my relationship with exercise, and those things were improving. And then so that was like 2015 when I got diagnosed and started intuitive eating. And then by the end of 2016, 2017, my faith just exploded. And I started to have this relationship with Christ and understand him on a level that I never had before. And that freedom, like knowing that my worth had nothing to do with whether I was eating intuitively or whatever those things were, that is what truly gave me freedom from worrying about food and exercise, from thinking about it all the time, from, you know, I had gotten away from the restriction and the deprivation and those disordered habits around food. But even with intuitive eating, I was trying to do that perfectly. And so when I was really understanding the word more and understanding God's love and my identity is when I felt this true freedom of, oh, actually, I don't have to eat a certain way or move a certain way to be worthy. By that time, I had graduated from grad school and became a dietitian. And I felt so passionate about teaching people about intuitive eating. But then also I started a blog about intuitive eating and started working with people. And I very quickly realized I didn't know how to do that without talking about my faith. And so I just felt really strongly that that's what I needed to do. And that was a little bit scary. But I just started writing and talking and working with people from a Christian perspective. And that's how I got here.
Awesome. Well, I love hearing your backstory, and I know that there's a lot of women listening who have likely had a similar experience with, extreme dieting and fitness activities with the goal of looking a certain way or quote unquote being healthy, which, as you explained, was not actually healthy for you and probably isn't super healthy for most people. I would love to find out from you, because you said that you started this blog on intuitive eating and started working with people and realized that you had to incorporate the faith piece in order to feel like you were fully serving people. So what makes your faith-based approach to intuitive eating different than one that doesn't incorporate faith?
Yeah, so I think intuitive eating gets so much right in that you're rejecting this diet mentality, this system of beliefs that you have to look a certain way to be valuable, or you have to eat a certain way, or you have to earn things with your food and exercise habits. That you learn that your worth doesn't come from those things. Those things that, that's not what serves you. You're allowed to eat whatever you want. You can trust your body. There's all of these principles of intuitive eating that are so good. And I feel like they fall flat without the word. Because if we're saying that you don't earn your worth and value with all of these things, that you just have that worth and value, you're loved, I guess it's like, okay, that can take me so far, but knowing that there's a Father in heaven that loves me, knowing that I have this personal relationship, this unconditional love, grace, it's so many things. I feel like intuitive eating like really hits biblical principles very well. But what's missing is the power and the grace and the love of God and the Holy Spirit working with you. Being attuned to the Holy Spirit is a huge part of being attuned to your body and being able to make decisions that honor your taste buds and your preferences and also your physical health. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've had a similar experience with that same question. Like you were saying, when people say that your worth isn't in your body or in your appearance, I agree that if God's not part of the conversation, then I don't see why that would be the case. Because if you think about it, let's say to be playing devil's advocate, if God didn't exist, then I actually believe that your worth actually does come from the way that you look and that kind of thing, because, that's what our society puts value on. And there is a lot of different types of stigma in the world that actually affects how people treat you or what kind of opportunities you get. So if there isn't any sort of moral standard and, kind of equal playing field that all people have, because we're all, God's creation and seen by him the way that he sees Jesus. Without that, I actually am like, I don't really think there is evidence that your worth doesn't come from these things. So I can totally agree with you there that without the God piece, that the idea of having self-worth outside of either your appearance, especially as a woman, and then also your performance or your productivity or all the things that we perfectionists like to be a little bit too interested in. So I'm definitely on the same page there.
Exactly. It's like your accomplishments, your whatever you're doing is what gives you worth without God. But with God and with salvation, it's just your being that gives you worth.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I feel like you can start to do works from acceptance as opposed to for acceptance. And
yes,
I think that's a piece of the puzzle that sometimes for Christian women they miss, because they think, well, if I totally accept God's love for me, then I'm not going to, live the best life that I can, or I'm not going to, serve people the way that I could if I wasn't trying to earn it. And I actually think that obviously that's the exact opposite of the way that God wants us to act. And having that identity of that your personal value does not come from your performance, I actually think gives women a lot more freedom to do things that might be scary, to show up in ways that they might not do if they were afraid of looking dumb or making a mistake, that kind of thing. And
it's so true.
Yeah. And they can actually have more, they can empower other women, and they can have more of an impact because of their sense of self-worth not being hinged on their success. So definitely on the same page there. Is there anything in the intuitive eating, like the traditional intuitive eating practice, that you feel does not align with faith? I'm just curious. It could be that you don't feel that way, but I'm just wondering if you've run into anything.
Yeah, I don't really think so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think that I mean, if like we're talking about Elise Resch, Evelyn Tribal's intuitive eating work principles, I definitely think that it's all pretty darn good. I do think that there is, in the intuitive eating health at every size community, there's pieces of things that I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm sure like there's definitely times where I think like, oh, that community would be upset with me right now for saying this or for thinking this. But that's, we're all going to have differences and things like that. But as a Christian, like, for instance, the health at every size community, I think would say that you don't have any obligation to be a good steward of your body. But the Bible tells us that we are to be good stewards of our body. Now, that doesn't earn my worth or value, but I am called to do that. And through God's grace, if you're accepting God's grace, usually out of that comes the desire to do the things he's calling you to do. And one of those things is being a good steward to your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that can get really controversial in our current, like, just social media and all that kind of climate, because from my perspective, I do think that there are times where we have desires, like fleshly desires, that if you're not a Christian, it's just, hey, that's how I feel and that's what I want. And I'm going to just do it because that makes me feel good. And I feel like as a Christian, there's a lot of stuff that you might desire that isn't necessarily something that God would want you to pursue, or, maybe it feels good in the moment, but it's actually really harmful. So I do feel like that world can sometimes start to expand into this idea of like, anything you want to do, whatever your desires are, that kind of thing. It's just like a free for all, and you can just do whatever you want and nobody can say anything. And I don't think that the intuitive eating book or anything like that talks about that kind of thing. But I feel like with the kind of climate we have in our country, it's just kind of going that direction. And I think sometimes people can feel a little bit turned off by that. And then it kind of makes it difficult for Christian women to approach intuitive eating, because they might start to think, well, I don't want to just, do whatever I feel like and not have any sort of discipline or like self-awareness or anything like that. So that's why I asked about the intuitive eating practice, if there was anything that you felt was in conflict, which I didn't think there was, but I wasn't sure because you've done so much work on it. I was like, maybe you've come across something that might be in conflict. So
yeah, I think that a lot of people take it and run, just like you were saying, to ways that are outside of intuitive eating. Like a lot of people will quickly describe intuitive eating as kind of diety, right? Like you eat when you're hungry and you stop when you're full. Or people will describe intuitive eating like you can eat whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, and it doesn't matter. But that's not really true, because there are 10 guiding principles of intuitive eating. And, some of those include like respecting your body and considering nutrition and moving your body. And so all of one of the principles of intuitive eating is, unconditional permission to eat all foods. And I absolutely believe in that. But the other principles play in too. We listen to our hunger and fullness. We pay attention to how foods make us feel. And we make a conscious decision. Do we want to eat these foods? Do we want to feel that way? Like, what are those things? And in my practice, I really work on this whole journey is in partnership with the Holy Spirit. So not only are we getting attuned to our bodies, but we're also becoming attuned to the Holy Spirit. And just like the Lord convicts us all of different things, right? You might feel convicted about something that someone else totally doesn't feel convicted about. I think about food and things like that as well. It's like the verse, I have permission to do, for all things are permissible for me, but not all things are valuable or beneficial to me. I have permission to eat any foods that I want. And that's not going to change my worth or change my value or any of those things. But for instance, I love my coffee and I would drink coffee all day, every day. If I could, I love it. But I know that if I just drink a whole bunch of coffee, I'm going to feel really yucky and I'm not going to be as available to serve and honor God. I'm going to be short with my son. I might snap at my husband. I'm going to have a headache. I'm not going to be as good when I'm working with clients, whatever those things are. And like, I feel this conviction from the Lord of like, girl, don't drink so much coffee, drink some water so you're able to do the work I'm calling you to do. So it's not that I can't drink coffee or I think I'm a bad person or anything's wrong with me if I drink more than 2 cups of coffee, but it's I'm using all of these skills and critical thinking and making the decision to do what works best for me and makes me the most available for the Lord.
I love that. And I actually had that verse written down, like it's literally like on a piece of paper, and I forget the reason why I'd written it, but it's 1 Corinthians 6:12. It says, everything is permissible for me, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible for me, but I will not be mastered by anything. And I think it's really interesting in just because of all the different influences with nutrition, and you're a dietitian as well. So obviously there are some foundational, biological and physiological things that we understand about food and nutrition and how things affect our bodies generally. And then, like you said, also personal experience can play into that as well. I think it is really helpful to come at this from a mindset of, like you said, unconditional permission. It's not like you're a bad person or a sinner if you eat something that isn't the best for your body, but is eating that stuff all the time actually something that is beneficial for you? Or do you feel like food is something that's actually running your life or mastering your life, as, for you wanted to use the term in the Bible? So, and actually, I feel like this leads me into a conversation I wanted to ask you about today, since I get a lot of questions about this from my Christian clients, and I would love to hear your perspective on it. Ironically, I'm like 2 days away from finishing a 21-day fasting practice with my church, and everybody's kind of addressed or approached the fast differently, but the idea was that there should be it has to be food in some way. I mean, they didn't say that we had to do it, and obviously people can do whatever they want, but our pastor was suggesting that if somebody was going to do it, it should be based around food and not like a social media fast or, a TV fast, that kind of thing. So I would be really curious to hear from you. How does spiritual fasting work if somebody is practicing intuitive eating?
Yes, girl. This is so funny because I am also in the midst of a 21-day fast with my church.
Maybe it's a thing. Maybe they've all just kind of decided together, we're going to do this.
Yeah, I don't know. So my pastor really said you can fast from anything that you think is taking your time away from God. And I really agree with that. So I got bombarded with questions about this last year around Lent. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't quite know how to answer this question, because I know that like Jesus assumed we would fast. He doesn't say if you fast, he says when you fast. Like this is a spiritual practice for a reason. But I also work with eating disorders, and I know like someone with an eating disorder should not be fasting from food. Like what does that look like? And so I kind of did some digging and learning about spiritual fasting. And I really think the purpose is finding something that is really valuable to you in some way, or is taking your time and focus away from the Lord and choosing to put it aside to then spend time with the Lord. So, and I do know, there's lots of people that talk about the physiological effects and benefits of fasting from food. We could talk about that, but I feel like it's this spiritual journey. And if you ask the Holy Spirit to show you what the thing is, like you will see it. I've run lots of fasts from dieting, like helping people not diet. For a while, because is there something that's an idol in your life? It could be a good thing, but maybe you're overdoing it. Or is there something that you routinely choose over spending time with God? So I think that fasting is really important, but I don't think that it has to be food. I think it can be food though, even if you're an intuitive eater, if you're far along in eating disorder recovery, like very far along, and you don't think it's going to be triggering, and it's something that is possible for you to do, I think starting off with a small fast is okay. But the way I look at it is like we fast for a lot of different reasons, but mainly like we're fasting to put God first and get closer to God. And back in the day, think about how much time and energy and effort they had to put into gathering, preparing food. And like nowadays, depending on where you're at with food, but people don't spend that as much time doing all of that. So fasting then opened up a lot of available time for them for quiet time with the Lord, for whatever that is now. Whereas now, for a lot of people, it doesn't open up a whole lot of time. And depending on where your heart is, I think a lot of people use it like as like, oh, I'm going to do this fast and I'm going to lose some weight. I'm going to do this fast and it's going to give me better health or whatever those things are, instead of I'm doing this fast to get closer to the Lord. So I think your intentions, your heart posture is really, really important. My pastor has been preaching about getting a breakthrough. That's what this whole thing is about. And he says that fasting and prayer are like the 1-2 punch. So whatever you're fasting from, whatever space that opens up in your life, take that time in prayer and in silence with the Lord and all of those things. And it's like this 1-2 punch to growth. So that's where I'm at with that. I think it like your intentions are what is key behind a fast.
Definitely. I feel like our churches are like totally on the same vibe right now, because I'm pretty sure that, one of our pastors did a talk about the fasting and prayer combination as well. And I feel like, because our pastor, when he was talking about it being food specifically, I think his perspective was, we've done it before where he didn't specify that he wanted it to be food. And the reasoning that he gave, and I think, like I said, I agree with the idea that the fast is supposed to free up time and supposed to just give you more opportunity to connect with God. And for some people, fasting from actual food does help with that. One of the things he was mentioning was the idea that fasting helps you learn how to deny fleshly desires and not let your cravings for things be the thing that drives your decision making as well. And I think with the food thing, I mean, I've done the social media fast. We did a spending fast last year. Like we literally said, okay, for 21 days, we're not going to spend any money. And there's definitely been some benefits to that for sure, because, if you go 21 days without spending money, it's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize how often I'm like just wanting to buy something on Amazon or that kind of thing. But I think he was saying that with the food fasting, you actually get into this state where you have to actually deny your deny physical desires. And, I would say, obviously, things like social media, we develop some level of addiction to. So you could argue that there is some physical element to that as well. But I know that from his perspective, the idea was to put ourselves into a state where there was some like true physical denial of comfort.
Yeah. Which, to be honest, like it's biblical and I see it, and I don't see that there's anything wrong with it. But where the struggle comes in is the culture that we're in today. If you let diet culture creep into that, like then we're in a world of hurt.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because the fast that they originally recommended, I laugh about this because I tried it and it was awful, was the Daniel fast. And I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but basically it's like real food vegan, essentially, like all unprocessed food and no animal products whatsoever, and no sugar, no alcohol, no caffeine. And it's funny because I've had this conversation with a couple people from my church that chose not to do the Daniel fast, and they actually chose to do things like sun up to sundown fasting. I know my husband did 48 hours once a week of not eating. I had some other people that just did like 24 hours twice or something. I personally, unless I had a training session with my coach in the morning, I was skipping breakfast and just eating, bigger meals later in the day. So with the Daniel fast, our experience, more mine than my husband's, but my husband didn't have a great experience with it either. I actually found that I was thinking more about food and was like super distracted because I was trying to eat enough and was trying to figure out what I could eat and following these rules. And it was more distracting. And honestly, I would eat a giant meal and then be hungry an hour later. And I was like, what? I don't understand what the point of this is, because it's completely just like distracting me from the whole purpose. And now I'm thinking more about food when I really wasn't before. So that's why, like, when I decided what I was going to do, I ended up fasting from coffee, sugar, alcohol, and mostly breakfast. Like I said, I wasn't going to skip breakfast before a workout, but I found that so much easier because I didn't really have to think about it. It was just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to not have breakfast and I'll eat a little bit more with my other meals. And yeah, I was hungry some of the mornings, but it was like a totally different experience than being like, okay, what am I allowed to eat? And am I going to get enough that I'm not hungry and I'm going to be hungry an hour later and then looking for food again? So I feel like that's where, if somebody is going to do spiritual fasting, don't just do what everybody else is doing if it's actually counterproductive.
Yes. And that's with anything, Laura. Like we all want to like, oh, what did Daniel do? We'll do that fast. Like, what plan did she do to raise her kids so perfectly? What plan did she follow to, achieve that deadlift? We all want this like step-by-step laid out plan, whatever it is, but like, that's not how God works. And we're not all the same. And so if you're considering a spiritual fast from food, meet with the Lord and see where he guides you. See what he's calling you to fast from and try it out.
Yeah. And I think anyone who has had any sort of eating disorder history or is in the process of weight restoration or anything like that, I would definitely not suggest doing a food fast. I mean, maybe something like caffeine or alcohol or something like that sometimes can be used as a comfort item, but really isn't something that you need to function. So, but if it's actual just normal food, then like I said, I think it's pretty clear that kind of population should not do it. And then even somebody who, if you have like reactive hypoglycemia or something, and anytime you're fasting, you just completely have, just can't function, then you might want to think about, is that actually the best thing for you to be doing? Since there are so many different reasons why people might not tolerate fasting, especially with our complicated health histories, that kind of thing. So, and I don't particularly care for fasting myself, but this has been an interesting 3 weeks to just see how I do with it. And, yeah, I don't think I could do it with what my husband does with the 48 hours. I think I would probably go nuts. But for me, skipping breakfast is like, I spend that time, instead of cooking and eating, I spend it with Bible study and prayer journaling and that kind of thing. So I'm like, all right, I feel like this is much more the point than it was when I was completely distracted trying to figure out what food I was going to eat.
Yes, yes. So I'm with you 100% on that. So I am taking this 21-day fast, like from my phone. So not like I'll answer phone calls. I'm recording this podcast on my phone, but like I'm not listening to podcasts. I'm not checking my email. I'm not looking at social media. Like I'm not doing any of those things on my phone. Because I really recognize like picking my phone up and opening some stuff and scrolling a little bit and whatever. Like I did that when I was anxious. I did that when I was bored. I did that for some distraction. Like it was kind of taking up a lot of my time. And it has been, like so eye-opening how many times, especially the first week, how many times throughout the day I would just mindlessly pick up my phone And what I have loved about this is now it has been this prompt every time I do that to pray. And so it's like, oh, you're feeling a little anxious, like looking at your phone's not going to help at all. But if I pray, then like my priorities are, like what's important becomes very clear to me. And like, it's been so beneficial and helpful. So I think that there is massive benefit in denying yourself and spending time with the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting to think about how that plays into the intuitive eating method or mindset, because like you said, if the mindset is, oh, I'm going to do this fast with my church and like, I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to get like healthier. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with getting healthier. If somebody wants to feel better and they think I'm going to eat more vegetables, like that'll make me feel better, that's fine. But if the whole goal of the fast is focusing on your body, then obviously that's completely missing the point, because the point is to really take the attention away from your body, even if you're uncomfortable. So, and I feel like I can't remember if I've seen people asking intuitive eating experts about fasting as a practice from like a health perspective, but I don't see a lot of people talking about it from a spiritual perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I've like every time I've seen anybody ask that question about like intermittent fasting, that kind of thing, usually the response that I see, not always, but most often, is that, well, it's denying hunger, so that's not intuitive eating, and so it doesn't work together. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you about the spiritual fasting component, since the whole point is to actually deny your desires and your cravings to, just submit that to God. And it's not the way that most people that aren't Christian would be thinking about the purpose of fasting.
Yeah, it's true that like we try not to deny our hunger, right? We try to honor our hunger. I believe that God gave us hunger signals for a reason. He wants us to fuel ourselves, to be able to do his work, all of those things. But spiritual fasting is a biblical principle. It's something that we're called to do. And I think if your heart is right and if you're removed from diet culture, I don't see that there is anything wrong with that as an intuitive eater. If you're depriving yourself long-term to lose weight or whatever, then we've got something else to talk about.
So I'm curious, because this is something that I see in a lot of the women that I work with, where it's almost, and I don't even know how to explain this, but it seems like there's this trend of Christian women being obsessive about their bodies and their diets and their health, and basically like that concept of stewarding your body or stewarding your health, but taken to an extreme level where they do things that are actually harmful to their health. So why do you think that so many Christian women fall into this, considering that I feel like, based on what you were talking about earlier in our conversation, we should be the ones that don't fall prey to that kind of mindset?
I mean, I say this over and over all the time. Like, I think that dieting and diet culture and this focus on being hyper vigilant about caring for your body, like it is this tricky tool that the enemy is using to keep Christian women from living on purpose, from doing what God is calling them to do. And it's such a good choice for him, because it is something that innately is good. It's good to want to take care of your body, to be a good steward. It's a good thing to consider nutrition, to exercise, whatever those things are. But the enemy like pours in, do more, to where that's what we're thinking about. That's what we're focusing on. It becomes an idol. We're no longer serving the Lord. We're no longer taking care of our bodies to serve the Lord. And we are like serving our body image. We are serving health, or we're trying to take control. So a lot of the times, and I really went through this, it's not even about like what your body looks like. It's about being healthy and being in the best possible health and avoiding getting diseases. We think we have the power to avoid any disease or anything like that with our food and exercise choices to like this extreme, when really we don't have that control. So I think it's easy for people to fall into because it's a good thing innately to take care of our bodies. And there are lots of scriptures that talk about those things. But the problem is that they get pulled, it just gets too extreme. And of course, because we live in this culture where all of that stuff is fed really deep and really extreme. And I think, a lot of people don't have that full understanding of their identity and their worth in the Lord as well. They're trying to earn it.
Yeah, I feel like that piece of the control is a really common theme that I see. And it's tough because, on one hand, I feel like we live in this environment that is kind of designed to not be conducive to our health. So if you think about it, like if you're eating foods that are manufactured, there's food scientists that create those foods to make them more appealing and attractive and make them harder to eat mindfully. And there's that environmental influence, as well as the idea that, like, our day-to-day lives, you could hypothetically do very little physical activity and still function as a human in today's society. Whereas even just like 100 years ago, if you think about things like cooking and doing laundry and all of that was very physical. So you couldn't avoid doing physical activity just to be like moving through your life. So I feel like we live in this environment where it's kind of stacked against our health, and we do have to make some decisions and have some discipline around not doing things that are just easy all the time. But on the other hand, like you said, you could be doing everything 100% perfect, quote unquote, because obviously that's kind of not even a real thing. But you could think that you're doing everything perfectly and still have illness. I mean, I've seen two women in the alternative health, kind of like real food paleo sphere, both in their early 30s, recently be diagnosed with cancer. And they're both, they eat healthy food and they exercise and they do like non-toxic cleaning products and, clean beauty stuff and all of that. And they still got cancer. And I'm not saying that there's anything, like, it is not their fault. It's not like, they should have done something differently. But I think that's a great example of a situation where, and this, I see this happening all the time. I've talked to patients that they've had family members like this, where it doesn't actually, you don't get protected against bad things happening to your health or anything, just because you make all these quote unquote really good decisions. So I feel like from a mindset perspective, we have to get to a place where we can see that there's value in making certain decisions. And sometimes those decisions are more challenging. Like, I know for me, if I didn't think exercise was going to benefit my body, I'd probably not do as much as I do, because sometimes I just feel like not going to the gym. But I know that from long-term experience that if I'm active at a certain level, I feel my best. It helps me, just have good energy and have good mobility and all of that. So sometimes I have to make decisions that go against my immediate desires on a day-to-day basis. But at the end of the day, I'm also not thinking, oh, if as long as I exercise at least 3 or 4 days a week and I eat these vegetables and I eat grass-fed meats and all of this stuff, then I'm not ever going to get sick, because that's not true. And I think that that's the belief that, at least in the wellness space, wellness is kind of in quotes, it's kind of this belief that, like, you're 100% responsible for the outcome of your health. And I feel like that's a dangerous message, because I believe in personal responsibility for choices. Obviously, like, you're choosing your behavior, but you're not 100% responsible for the outcome of those choices. And that's where I feel like people get confused, because it's like, oh, I thought I was doing everything right. How did this happen? And from a Christian perspective, obviously, we know God's in control, and he's the one that allows things to happen to us or doesn't allow them to happen to us. We're not the ones that decide on that.
Absolutely. I love what you just said. We're not in control of the outcome. That has been my 2020 phrase, is like, I will not be attached to the outcome. I am going to show up every day and I am going to be obedient to what God is calling me to that day. And the outcome is in his hands. Like, I'm not going to get myself set on things have to look this way, or they're going to look that way, or it's going to turn out this way. I'm just going to be obedient where I feel he's calling me to, and he is in charge of the outcome.
I love it. I feel like that can apply to people in business as well, since there's so much of that. I've had to go through a lot of that business wise in the last couple months, in the last year or so. And it's been quite humbling to have that experience. So, and the same thing goes for people's health as well. And it's not easy. It's not something that's like, oh, I just decided I'm not going to care about what happens to me. Like, I'm just going to, be totally at peace no matter what happens. But I think the more we can develop that as a skill, the more we're going to be able to, really show up and do the things that we feel God's asking us to do without being afraid or without being disappointed if things don't turn out the way that we were expecting them to. Now, I feel like I could keep talking with you about this for a long time, but I know that we have just a couple minutes left. So based on what you just said, I know that you are releasing the outcome of the work that you're doing to God, but I'm curious, what is your big vision for the work that you're doing and the impact that you hope to have on the world?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question, Laura.
You got 2 minutes to answer it.
It's really funny because you just said about business, and, I've experienced that in the last couple years. I had this vision in my head of what this was going to look like. I was going to work with clients, and I want to be a keynote speaker, and I want to write this book, and I wanted my name to be well known. And the Lord has really humbled me a lot in the last few years. And I really am to a place of realizing what I want is people to have freedom from this obsession with food and exercise. I want people to not be dying from complications of anorexia on the daily in America. And I don't know exactly what my part in that is going to look like. If all I ever do for that is praying every day for it, then so be it. But I just want to make a difference in that. And so I work with clients. I am starting a podcast that's launching in the spring. I blog a little bit, and we'll see what the Lord does with it. I'm just trying to show up and be available to talk about it, to show people that God is faithful and he is good, and 100% healing is possible.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question for you, and then we'll share with the audience where they can find you, including if your new podcast is available. And this is a question I ask everybody at the end of the show. And that is, what do you believe makes a woman more than a body?
Oh my gosh. What makes a...
Sorry, I'm just leaving all the big ones for the end.
No, that's okay. I love that. Truly, for me, the truth is you're who you are in Christ. You're so much you are God's child. He created you. Your relationship with him, your salvation is everything. Your purpose in him, your identity in him. I mean, I used to think that my body was the most important thing. And now really it's just what's helping me walk around on this earth. But who I really am is who God has called me to be.
I love it. Now, like I said, I know that there will be people wanting to find more from you, like your blog and your podcast. So, and we'll put links into the show notes, but where can people find you if they want to learn more about the work you do and your perspective on these big topics?
So my blog is charleecassel.com. I'm also on Instagram at charlie.cassel. And the podcast is Intuitive Eating for Christian Women. And it should be available spring of 2020.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we will put links to all of that in the show notes. And Char-Lee, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show today and chatting about some stuff that I don't think is often talked about in the world of health and even in the intuitive eating space. So I really appreciate your perspective and just love to see the work that you're doing and can't wait to see your podcast or listen to it when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you to all you listeners who spent the last almost hour with us, and we will see you here next time on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. If you're anything like the hundreds of health and nutrition entrepreneurs that I've worked with over the past few years, you want to create an efficient, structured, and organized online health office that saves you time, maximizes your impact and your income, and provides a great experience for your clients. But maybe you've been told falsely that all you need is free tools like Google Calendar and Google Drive to make that happen. Or maybe you know that you need to use a client management software like Practice Better, but you feel overwhelmed trying to figure out how to set it up in a way that actually saves you time rather than wasting it. Either way, the fact is you need a well-oiled client management system, one that works for you like a team member if you want to have a successful online health and nutrition business. And in my brand new free training, I'm going to teach you the 6 essential steps to set up Practice Better for a more profitable and efficient virtual health and wellness business. I'll give you the step-by-step system for setting up your client management software that will get you out of the day-to-day admin work and back into the role of the high-level health and nutrition professional where you belong. I'll also show you how my client Jackie used these exact principles to help her make over $200,000 in revenue in her first full year of business, while also preparing to become a first-time mom. And by the end of this 60-minute training, you'll finally know the best way to create an efficient, structured, and organized online health office that saves you time, maximizes your impact and income, and provides an amazing front-end experience for your clients and customers. To get access to this exclusive brand new training, go to practicebettertraining.com and select the training day and time you'd like to attend. And don't worry if you can't make any of the times listed. We'll be sending the replay to all registrants, so just be sure to look for an email from hello@lauraschoenfeldrd.com to get your personal link to join the training. Having a well-organized client management system is a non-negotiable when it comes to building a financially successful online health business that doesn't burn you out. And I can't wait to show you the exact steps to doing so in the fastest and most efficient way possible. Go to practicebettertraining.com to sign up now, and I look forward to seeing you on the training.